Hey guys, it's Will from Tested.
And it's Norm from Tested.
Norman Chan.
We're doing another camera comparison
More
today.
Cameras.
And this one I think is a really interesting comparison.
These look like big boy cameras to me.
They are absolutely big boy cameras. And I don't know exactly front hand, when I start looking at these, which one is the bigger boy camera.
Well, one is bigger, and I think one is the bigger boy camera.
Well,
but I don't know that they're the same camera.
Kind of. This camera here, which does not have the lens attached, this is the Canon 6D. It came out a little over a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I guess now. 2 years, wow, it's been a long time. But this is Canon's entry-level full-frame camera. When we say full-frame, of course, that means it's a full-frame sensor, 35mm equivalent on the inside. And this is the one I've been using for 2 years now, actually.
So all those pictures on Tested, most of them are shot with that guy right there.
Most of them are shot with this camera. For being a full-frame camera, it's actually relatively compact. Of course, not as small as something like Sony's A7 series. But late last year, Canon also announced the 7D Mark II.
Okay, so I'm not an expert, but
Yes.
I'm looking at that, and it is 1D more than the 6D.
That's right.
So that means it is at least 1/6 better a camera.
So in terms of its naming system, Canon has classes of camera both in the single digits, double digits, and I guess triple digits. In the double digits, higher is better. 50D is better than 40D, 60D is better than 50D, 70D is better than 60D. And those are all same size sensors, APS-C, DSLRs.
That's in terms of like resolution or capability, like the number of frames a second it can shoot or stuff like that, right?
Oh, just the sensor size.
Okay.
Just in terms of sensor size. In the single digits, there's a 7D, which is actually an APS-C sensor.
So it's a small sensor.
Well, yeah,
smaller
sensor, smaller than 35mm equivalent. Then there's a 6D, 5D, 1D, 1DX. So lower number, better in the single digits.
Really?
Yes.
This is very confusing to me.
Very, very confusing. So theoretically, the 6D is a higher end camera than the 7D, just for the mere fact that it has a larger sensor.
So the 5D is a full frame camera.
5D is a full frame.
Is the 1D a full frame as well?
1D is full frame, high speed camera for action. And the 5D is kind of the sweet spot for professionals in terms of how fast the autofocus is and how good the image quality is.
So something you can use to take pictures of, say, a tennis match or people playing football, but also would be appropriate for wedding portraits and stuff like that.
Yes, yes. And if you're doing wildlife or very fast sports, 1D is something you need very fast tracking with. Now the 7D is actually kind of like the 1D of APS-C sensors. It's the best APS-C sensor size camera that Canon makes right now, the 72.
So does that mean this is better than any of the 2-digit cameras?
Yes.
Okay.
Better than any of that, which is why, and
very confusing.
And the same price as of right now, even though one camera is about 2 years newer. The 7D announced in November last year, $1,800 on Amazon right now.
Okay.
And
is that just for the body or with a kit lens?
Just for the body.
Okay.
There is a kit lens option, and then the 6D between $1,500 and $1,800. $1,800 I think is the list price, and then there's always rebates that you can get for $1,500. So looking at these, you would think, okay, I know that lower number for single digits is better. Why not get the 6D?
Full frame is better than APS-C,
Full frame is better
right?
than APS-C. You know, if you shoot images at 800 ISO, 1600 ISO, or low light 3200 ISO, you're going to get much less noise with the full frame sensor. Why would you ever want to consider the 7D? Well, the 7D has many features that the 6D doesn't have. Primarily one. So.
What are those features?
Okay, I'm just going to go run off some of its performance capabilities. Continuous shooting. This can shoot up to 10 frames per second.
So you hold down the trigger and you just boom, 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 boom.
I'll do a quick demo of that. Why not? Actually, do I have it in high-speed mode? Yep. Can you hear this?
That sounded really fast. And it's actually triggering a manual shutter every 1/10 of a second.
Yes, I'm going to delete so many photos on my memory card after this.
That's fine, it's okay.
It does reach a buffer point, and then it needs to write to the JPEGs or RAW, whatever you have it set to. So when you're shooting action sports photography, you're going to want the higher shutter.
So that means
Higher frame rate.
You're sitting with a big long lens at the end of a football field. You have a monopod.
Yep.
You're probably you see somebody's going out to catch a pass. You just hold that button down and you get 20, 30 frames in 3 seconds.
Yes.
And theoretically, one of those will be something that's good.
Yeah, and you don't always want to shoot in the fastest continuous shutter mode because you limit your autofocus, for example.
Okay.
The fastest is 10 FPS, but there are different modes with slower, but that's just a general benchmark. On the 60, it's 4.3 FPS, which I don't have a lens attached to this, and also nor battery even, it seems like. They use the same battery, but it's noticeably slower.
Okay.
Now, this also does a wider actual shutter speed. So it goes from, I think, 30 seconds slow shutter to 1/1/8,000th of a second, which is twice as slow as this. I mean, you get, if you're in super bright daylight.
Twice as fast or twice as slow?
Twice as fast as the
So that's
the
a 1/4000th max shutter.
max speed.
So that means you can open up the aperture with a fast lens, way bigger
on a super bright day,
and keep the
get
ISO.
something. And I don't know exactly. I'm not a sports photographer, so I don't know what you would need 1/8,000th of a second for. But I imagine if you're shooting sports, that's going to come in handy.
When I was shooting with film, with fast film on a bright sunny day, at 1/4000th, you could catch a tennis ball in mid-flight, but you couldn't catch a baseball coming off the bat.
So maybe that 1/8,000th,
like somewhere in there.
Yes. Okay. Definitely useful. ISO range is comparable. Actually, the 6D has a wider ISO. That's also due to the fact of the larger sensor.
Okay.
It goes to 25,000, and this one, without boosting it, is just 16,000.
So that means the pixels on the sensor are actually bigger. They're able to capture more light?
Yep.
Okay.
And you can actually pump more gain into it, which is what ISO basically is, digital gain. And then 70 has 2 memory slots. You actually have a SD card and compact flash slot.
Okay.
It's USB 3.
Can you write to both of those slots simultaneously?
You can,
so you have
you can
backup in case one of the cards dies?
Yep. You can do it in multiple ways. You can do it so you can have your RAWs saved to compact flash, and then your JPEG saved to SD, or the other way around. Okay. And you can store things differently.
And whereas the 60 is only
just SD.
Okay.
Just SD.
Is there a benefit to using compact flash at this point, or is it basically the SD card performance has reached a point where it doesn't matter? I
think SD card performance, if you're buying the extreme 95 megabytes per second, I think it's totally fine.
Okay.
But some people, it's
The redundancy is obviously a massive benefit, though, especially if you're doing like I assume that a camera like this that's high speed, fast focus is for people who are doing sports stuff and like war photography and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a little bit bigger case, so I assume that means it's going to be a little bit more sturdy. I don't know.
It is, and that's one of the things that's really interesting is that they actually decided to put this in a bigger body than the 6D, and it really looks functionally, the way the buttons are designed, it looks like a 5D Mark III.
Okay.
Show the backs.
Like the placement and size and positioning and all that is the same.
You have the row of shortcuts here. For focus, you actually have right there. This is a D-pad. You can choose your focus points. Right there, you have a dial and you're set, and then you have on top very similar. The four row of buttons,
and then your
dial.
swizzle,
yes, button here. So ergonomically, it's very similar to a 5D3. I'm very used to the slightly lighter body size of a 6D.
But you've shot out as 5D3 a fair amount.
It's 200 gram difference when you put a big lens like this on it, or even if you put a bigger telephoto lens, you're not going to notice that body size. Right. They have very similar LCDs, 3-inch LCD panels with 1 million dots on it. Neither have articulating LCDs.
So you can't pop them out.
And neither are touchscreen.
Do you feel like that's a problem or no?
I was a little surprised that the 7D didn't have at least the articulating LCD, which I'm not sure why it didn't.
I mean, I would have to assume that makes it a little bit less sturdy. Like anytime you put a screen on a couple of arms that can fold in and out, that makes it less rugged. And this camera looks to me like a camera that is designed to have the living shit beaten out of it out in the field.
Sure. I think the articulating LCD allows you to shoot more versatile positions and still put the camera up high and use a live view, or shooting video. And so I think it is a slight omission.
How's the viewing angle on the LCD? Can you hold it above your head and still see it okay?
You can still see it kind of okay. The optical viewfinder, these are DSLRs, are actually also different. The 6D has a 97% coverage. So what you see through the optical viewfinder isn't actually everything you're going to get.
It's a slight crop?
It is slightly cropped in, and this one has 100%. So that is going to be better on the 70 too. Now, the biggest difference though, is of course the image sensor and your autofocus. And whereas the 6D, you know, I've talked about how great full frame is, it actually has a pretty crappy autofocus system. There are only 11 points of autofocus on the 6D.
Just to be clear, it's crappy for a DSLR. That's still going to be better than most mirrorless cameras or smartphones?
No, it's pretty crappy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, better than smartphones. Some mirrorless cameras now have phase detect on sensor with many more points than 11. And the 11 points that are on the 6D, of those, only one of them, the center one, is crosshatch style, where it can detect both horizontal and vertical edges as would.
So the phase detect looks for things like the difference in color between the skin around your eye and your eyeball, and that's how it determines whether things are in focus?
And on the 7D, there are, I believe, 65 points of autofocus. It's more than, I believe, the 5D in terms of the cross type. I can't show that here. You can actually find diagrams online. It's a big array, kind of like this crosshatch.
And is this built into the actual sensor? Is that how it works?
There's an actual separate focus sensor that's a chip on here. But you mentioned the sensor. What's unique about the 7D is that there is also autofocus on the sensor itself, which allows it to autofocus when the mirror is flipped up. So when you're in live view, which I can show you, for example, right here, you can actually have autofocus without flipping the mirror up.
So that means, okay, so normally when you're doing autofocus, it's bouncing off of the reflex mirror and hitting the autofocus sensor and then determining where the focus points are. So as soon as you flip the mirror up, that ability to continue focusing goes away. This lets it keep focusing. That seems cool and useful.
It's useful, especially for video.
Okay, so now knowing that, it makes more sense. Your statement about the articulated screen makes more sense, right?
Yes, and this is really built to be a great DSLR for video shooting. Okay. It shoots 1080p, doesn't do 4K, has frame rates up to 60 FPS, although when you do 50 or 60 FPS, the live autofocus gets disabled. It does 24 FPS. There are 3 compression settings. It will save in MP4 or moves. And
can you do ABC? What codecs does it do?
MP4 and move H.264.
H.264. Okay, so it doesn't do ABC Pro or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
And you can do HDMI out. There's 8-bit uncompressed HDMI out with audio.
Does that show the stuff that's on the screen?
Clean HDMI. Okay. Plus, you have audio in that feed. So if you output it to a recording format, you get the audio there.
Makes it sync up or whatever.
There's microphone, and also finally a headphone jack built in.
Is there line in?
Line in for audio.
Okay, yes. so you don't have to fool with the external recorder. You just need a field mixer, basically.
I would say people, you should still record separately because the line in quality is only going to be so good.
Allow me to rephrase. Yeah. Having the line in from your field mixer and audio recorder makes it much easier to sync your audio recorder to the video later.
Absolutely, and there you go. You can see micro HDMI.
What's that top thing? Is that USB 3?
That is USB 3. You can see it is the long USB.
It's the fat one, so it'll be fast. That's good.
Yep.
Although, I mean, I feel like USB 3 on the camera is a little less important. Will it charge off of the USB as well?
I don't believe it will.
You need a separate charger.
Yeah, okay. It's a separate charger. It actually has a new variant of the battery, of Canon's EP6 battery. I think it's the 6N, theoretically larger capacity. And
it's compatible with the old batteries.
It is completely compatible with old batteries that you can charge with the same charger. Okay. But photos, I think the 6D still takes some more photos. It's rated for more photos because the processor here takes more power. This is the camera I used. I took it to CES. So I took it to CES, and my question was, one, would I benefit on location with the faster autofocus? And 2, did having an APS-C sensor, did that make a big difference compared to what I'm used to, the full frame?
I mean, and that can be a double-edged sword, right? You have a little bit smaller sensor, but presumably your processing and stuff is a little bit easier. Is it a lower megapixel?
Same 20 megapixels.
Same megapixel, okay.
Same megapixel on the front. But also, then the lens I use are different focal lengths because it's a multiplier of 1.6. So 24 to 70 then becomes the equivalent of like 36 to 100.
So that is a tighter, like the 20, when you use your 24-70, I assume you're using it a lot of the times at 24, right?
I like it at 24. Yeah, so I have 17 to 40, and I put that on, and that becomes more of a normal camera. So image quality, I think, was fantastic. I never really shot it. You can cap your auto ISO. You can cap the minimum shutter speed. You can actually do increments. And I found that I was comfortable capping this at ISO 3200. 32, sometimes 64. I could change that depending on if I was shooting 1/30th of a second. I did not find that losing the full frame affected the work I did for web work. So it's not going to.
I mean, your pictures end up 600 pixels wide a lot of the time.
Yeah. So even when you're cropping to something like 1920 by 1080 or even a 2560, 5,000 pixels cropped to that, you're going to get a lot of that detail back. You're not going to notice the grain. You're not going to notice the noise.
But I assume you did some side by side. Actually, did you ever have to fire the flash with the smaller sensor?
No.
So it does have a flash built in.
It does have a flash built in. I didn't fire a flash because if you're going to buy this, you're also probably going to use a separate flash to bounce off the ceiling.
Yeah. Or a ring flash or something like that.
Direct comparison, 60 images are absolutely better.
Okay.
Indoor, outdoor. When you put these both at 1600 ISO, 3200 ISO, the 60 noticeably better detail.
I assume that this is a thing that you have to look at how you're going to use the camera, because if the extra capabilities of the 7D let you capture, give you the access to capture the image that you wouldn't be able to get with the 60, then get the 7D, right?
And that is absolutely the thing that I love, was that high frame rate shooting at close to 10 FPS, and that much noticeably faster autofocus made shooting so much better. There's intelligent tracking
Easier
here.
or better?
Easier, both.
Okay.
There's intelligent subject tracking here, when you'll recognize a person and as a person walks across the frame. So the difficulties I have, for example, taking photos of Adam at a comic book convention, I would not have if a person was walking toward me or walking across a frame and not staying in the same plane. I was able to get much better in focus shots.
Does that make it more likely that you can do the thing where you hold the camera up above your head and just mash the button and you get a picture out of it that's good, or no?
Depends on the subject. If it's a big crowd, then it might have a more difficulty. But if it's like a single person, and it's pretty good at tracking a consistently moving object across the frame.
Okay.
Yeah. So overall, I think that if you were to buy a DSLR right now, and you knew you wanted to buy a full-body DSLR because you wanted to invest in lenses, I would have to go with the 7D Mark II over the 60.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't think that, while the full frame is really nice and the image quality is absolutely, it's fantastic, the better video options here and the awesome autofocus on the 7D makes this a much better camera.
When you're shooting video with this camera, can you take stills at the same time? Okay, so you can just match the shutter button and it goes. Did you do a lot of video? I know that this is
I didn't do a ton of video,
of the video world right now.
But just a little bit of video, just to test the autofocus tracking, and the ability to hold down the shutter button when you're shooting a video and not have it do the thing where it tries to contrast detect in and out. It saves your video, if you actually need that shot.
I have to assume that for this price, is it a 30-minute time limit too?
It is a 30-minute time limit.
Okay, which shouldn't be a problem if you're shooting film, but if you're doing the kind of stuff that we do, there may be an issue.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to imagine that the people who are shooting film with video for film, movie use.
Yes.
Like that focus stuff is super crucial.
Yeah, and you can still use there's no touch screen. Like I said, a lot of people have wanted to be able to adjust the focus on the screen, track an object as you're moving. But you can also change your focus with that D-pad, that little joystick in the back.
And you do that. Does that actually change the depth of the focus, or do you change the thing that you're tracking?
The thing that you're tracking.
Okay.
Yeah. But overall, I really like this camera. I'm a little disappointed we're going to send it back. B&H loaned it to us for a month. I'm really glad. I brought it to CES. I used it to shoot all that stuff when we were at the drone rodeo, the past couple of weeks, going out for some quadcopter flights. And the thing that I was worried about was missing having a full frame sensor, and I didn't miss that at the end at all.
So then just to reiterate, because it's a little tricky, if you're learning, if this is your first DSLR,
Neither of these cameras should be your first DSLR.
Okay, so go for one of the two-letter numbers that are a little bit cheaper and a little more forgiving first.
Yeah.
Then if you want to do portraiture and still life and stuff like that, stuff that's not moving, 60.
The 60 is a great studio camera.
Or low light.
Or yes.
Okay.
If you're doing still life, if you're doing just studio where you want to have really good depth of field,
product shots,
where you don't need to rely on the autofocus, then the 60. And the 60 does great video too. It does 1080p.
We've shot podcasts with the 60. You can watch them. They look much better than a normal podcast.
But if you want something that's going to be really versatile, really robust autofocus, and learn how to shoot tracking objects, moving objects, the 70, which this has been 5 years since they released the 7D, the previous version, I think it's a worthwhile upgrade.
If we're putting you on a plane to go to a war zone, which camera do you take?
It's the 7D, absolutely.
If we're putting you out at the Super Bowl this weekend,
it's the 7D.
If we're putting you at...
Well, I would get a 1D, but the 7D is, yes.
If you're going to a wedding, which camera do you take?
I think the 7D.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of movement, like shooting. I've tried to shoot weddings with a 6D, and getting someone dancing, for example, can be difficult.
The pose pictures you can do, but the action shots, which are the ones people really want, maybe a little more difficult. Okay.
Yep.
I think that's awesome, Norm. Thank you so much.
So that's it.
$1,800?
$1,800 for the body, which I think is already kind of discounted from when they launched it. There are a lot of options out there. Nikon has a really good, what they're calling like a 5D killer. It's a Nikon 750. I'll believe that one, I believe, next month. But if you're choosing, if you like Canon and you're choosing between the 7D, the 6 series, the 5D Mark III is in a whole different price range. Under $2,000.
It's $3,000.
It's $2,500.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
So around the $1,500 price range, under $2,000, I would get the 7D Mark II.
Thanks to B&H for loaning us the 7D Mark II for about a month. I think you said you had it. And we'll have more stuff on Tested real soon. See you guys later.
See ya.